Our first speaker this morning is Ginny Blankenship. She was born in rural Missouri in 1950 and is the youngest of 8. Even at a very young age, she was a lover of animals and nature. The love of animals and nature never left her knowing. At 21, she began singing and playing bass guitar in a total of 6 different bands. I think she was busy. She produced a CD called To Touch the Earth in 2008 and is a professional artist for many years. In 2024, she painted her 33rd mural. In the later 90s, she was guiding to begin to learn energy healing and studied and taught radionics. She's a certified Reiki master, reconnective healing, matrix energetics, and Native American feather medicine. She has traveled extensively through Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Georgia, Tennessee, Arizona, and California doing the healing work. A mystery continued to haunt her, and in meeting some Native Americans, they knew her within seconds, and it was a destined meeting, and she is now traveling this road with all of us. Please welcome Ginny Blankenship. I want to play the music from, what is it? Vanna White. Is that Wheel of Fortune? Something like that. Dee, 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 dee.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, I thought I had all afternoon to prepare for this, so let me get them. I got a bad knee, so I got to get up here. Okay. Do you have the drum or not? Okay, no problem. Okay, I'm going to start out with a song. I love this song, and it has a lot to do with what I'm going to be talking about today, towards the end of the presentation. As one we walk this earth together, as one we sing to her our song, as one we love her, as one we heal her. Her voice beats with our own as one. As one we join with her, our mother. As one we sing to her our song. As one we love her. As one we heal her. Her voice beats with our own as one. Her heart beats with our own as one. Okay, that song, like I said, it's about the oneness. And I think the end result of us being here, really, that oneness is what it's all about. But I'm going to start. Somebody very wise said a long time ago that you can take all the spiritual beliefs of the entire planet and put them together, and you still would not have the fullness of the truth. So we're still learning. And I really like how we're becoming more open-minded to other people's beliefs. And for me, it was always very strongly directed to the Native American belief because I had such a love of the earth and the animals. And being the youngest of 8, my mom was the youngest of 12. Not many people can say this, but my grandpa, my mom's dad, was born in 1851, 100 years before me. So the point of this is that I heard some stories. My mom was born in 1914, my grandma in 1860-something. So I heard stories, really horrible stories about what happened to some women. And Mom didn't even tell us some of the things that happened to her till she was 82 years old. And she cried, and I don't think she would have, except the circumstances led to it. But I said, Mom, why didn't you get help or do anything? And she goes, Ginny, back then everything was considered the woman's fault. So with that clash, let's go back 400 years ago and let's look at the Native American women before the Europeans got here. Well, they were very much honored in their tribe. They were respected for their wisdom and their compassion, their hard work. I know with the Sioux, it takes between 15 and 22 buffalo hides to make an average size teepee. They did all that work. So the teepee was considered their home. It was theirs. So if a man was living with them and if he wasn't nice to her, he was mean to her, she would take his stuff and set it outside, meaning the marriage was over. So they had a lot of say-so, And probably of all the tribes, I visited Cherokee, South Dakota, or North Dakota quite often, got to know a lot of people. But the Cherokee really, really almost put women above men. And the men there will even tell you that. So here's a couple of stories. I'm not going to say her name right. It was Aka Tula, something like that. In the early 1800s, she went with 2 other women to visit with the governor of Georgia to try to get some kind of settlement so that they wouldn't lose their land. So they went a long ways to see this governor and the soldiers, and they walk into the room. And the soldiers look at him and they go, well, where's your men? And she looked at him and she goes, well, where's your women? So that says a lot, doesn't it? But anyway, they wouldn't even talk to him, though, because they were women. And one thing I think is absolutely beautiful, we visited Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And most people don't know this, but the very first all-women's college in this country was built by the Cherokee in 1851. Several years later, it was destroyed by fire. I wonder who did that. But anyway, they did rebuild it, and it stayed in operation until 1950. So that's impressive. And I remember looking at their schedule of classes, and it was impressive, So that says a lot. And I want to do one quick little history thing because it ties to who I'm going to be talking about. But when the Europeans first got here, there were approximately 30 million Native Americans. There were actually about 50 million buffalo. There were a lot of buffalo. But 400 years later, that number was cut down to 300,000. That's 1% left. And out of that 300,000, 100,000 of their children were taken away. This was over a period of years by the government and the Catholic Church, the Methodist, and the Baptist Church, and put these kids in boarding schools. And one of these children that was in that boarding school became a teacher of mine. I don't think he realized it, and I didn't either, but we got to know each other, and man, did I learn some things from him. But he was adopted after his parents died, he was adopted by a white family in Springfield, Missouri. And he said he really grew to love his parents, but he always knew his soul connection. Sadly, when he came back to South Dakota to try to find his family, he couldn't find anybody alive. But he was an awesome human being. So I'm going to start this story with letting you know a little bit about who I was because this is part of the story. And pay attention, because everything I tell you is going to be like a puzzle piece. Every story fits, has a reason for it. So the first 3 stories happened when I was 15. And like she said, I just loved horses. I actually broke 3 horses before I was 15. I didn't break them, I friended them. I loved them and they loved me, so it was easy. So I was riding Flame, and I was on my neighbor's property, and I was as happy as a lark. You know, when I was on a horse, I was happy, and I preferred bareback. I always rode with a blanket. Later on, I started using a saddle, but those early years, and I ran a lot, and my legs were strong, and I loved the feel of the horse, and I could feel when they were turning. So it was just, to me, it was natural. So I came across this high crest, and all of a sudden, I don't know how to explain it, except I just got shot with an arrow of emotional pain. And I started crying so hard. I'm going to start crying. And I slid off his back, and I didn't know why I was crying. I knew it was about the Indians. That's all I knew. And it was sweet, because Flame reached down and he nudged the top of my hair with his lips, you know, like, "What's wrong, Ginny?" You know. So I was crying really hard, and I look up and I see a big buck standing there. Now, this is 1965, and trust me, there were a lot of deer illegally shot. You hardly ever seen a deer in the wild. But to see a buck standing that close to me, about from here to that first post, and it made me stop crying. I got myself together because I was in shock to see one just looking at me. So then when I stopped crying, he just looked at me, and then he walked away. So that's the first story, first puzzle piece. And the second came that same year. We took a trip to California to visit with to see my dad's brother, with whom we've never met before. He also had 8 kids. So we were going through the Southwest. And by the way, in grade school, the bookmobile would come around, and us older kids would go in and pick out a book to read. And I always got in trouble from the nuns because I was always picking out horse books and Indian books. And the nun would get mad. Maybe somebody wants to read something else. Well, I didn't think so. But anyway, so here we were in, I think it was New Mexico, and I kept seeing these signs that there was an Indian museum coming up. And I kept after my dad. I just really wanted to see Indians. I wanted to see this museum. So he stopped, and we went in. And it was so cool because there was this huge display. It was about 10 foot wide, about 20 foot long, and covered with glass. And underneath was a depiction of the earth, the rivers, the oceans, all the plants, people, every kind of animal you could think of. And above that was the stars and the moon. And then it said, on the bottom, there was a sign. It says, "If you want to know what the Native American belief is about the Creator, press the button." So I remember it was a big black button, and I pressed it, and this mechanical hand comes out, and these lights are attached to it, of course, and it shoots out, and these lights land on absolutely everything in the depiction. And then a sign pops up, and it says, "The Native Americans believe the Creator's loving energy is within all living things." And I went, yes, I just knew that. You know, I always argued with the nuns about that. But it was something I really felt was true. So I was happy. The next day, we were going through Arizona, and I seen a lot of signs that there was a reservation. And of course, again, I was after my dad. "Can we please stop our loop?" So I remember it was really hot and dry. And he said, "Well, Ginny, we're just going to make a quick little circle." I said, "Okay." So I remember the road was full of potholes, very dusty, and we made a big loop, and then we seen this like earth hut, and it was pretty good size around, and there was a couple of little kids playing on the back side of it, and there was this old Indian sitting on something in the front. And of course we were going very slow, and as we passed him, I rolled the window down and stuck my head out the window, and our eyes locked. And then he looked at me and he smiled and waved, and I waved back. And I kept sticking my head out the window as we went past. And then it was so dusty, I had to get back in the car. But when I got back in the car, I felt this energy snap in my body, like I was connected to him. And it was so weird. I never felt anything like that before. And when you're the youngest of age, 8, you kind of learn you don't have much clout, so you don't say much. So I kept it inside. But it's interesting because fast forward 25 years, we were coming through South Dakota, and we had 3 kids, and that's my husband over there. And we get over into the Black Hills, which I just thought were beautiful. And we were going down the backside. And just whenever we crossed from South Dakota into Wyoming, I felt that same energy snap. And I thought, what? And I remembered it instantly because of what I felt before. I looked at my husband who was driving. He was, he didn't feel it. Looked in the back seat. The 2 boys were fine. But I looked at my daughter, and she was looking at me with her mouth dropped. And I said, did you feel that? And she goes, I said, what did you feel? She said, Mom, it felt like I was attached to something and it suddenly broke. I go, yeah, that's exactly what I felt. It's kind of interesting because when she went to college, she minored in Native American Studies, so she had this pull as well. So then, let's see, where am I at? Okay, yeah, there was one other time when I was in my later 30s, I guess. I got the book Crazy Horse, and I was reading it, and I just loved it. But when I got to the part where he was sitting around the campfire and he was talking to his warriors, and in the book it described a leaf came down and landed on his shoulder. And he said he picked the leaf up and he looked at it and he looked at his warriors, and then he announced to them that he seen his ending and he would be leaving soon. And they got really upset. When I read that, I again cried like I did when I fell off a flame. And I thought, what the hell's wrong with me that I'm crying so hard? I'm not talking tears. I'm talking like somebody you really loved just died. It was that kind of pain. And I remember I got up and locked the door so the kids wouldn't come in and think I was nuts. So I got myself together. So here's what happens next. I was 42, and I went to my very first powwow. And I didn't even know what they were. It was in Vienna, Missouri. And a couple of my girlfriends were coming later in the day, but I got there early, and I was walking around. And I seen this display of really beautiful jewelry. And I went over to it, and I was looking at the jewelry, and there was this Indian on the other side, and he was waiting on a couple of ladies. And it was kind of interesting because he was waiting on them, and he turned around, he heard me come up, turned around and glanced. And then he goes like this and turns around like he just seen something that shocked him. So I turned around and thought, what the heck did he see? And there was nobody behind me. And then I turned back around, and he was already coming towards me. And he came right up to me. He would look totally serious, and he said, can I take your hand a moment, please? Well, I'd never been to a powwow. I thought, maybe he's a palm reader. I didn't know. So I said, okay. I gave him my hand, and then he didn't look at it. He just held it, and he got about a foot away from my eyes. And then he said, you were a warrior in your past life, and you fought really hard for your people. He said you had 3 sons, and when you died, you stayed on the earth plane a long time because you were so worried about your sons. And then he just looks like he's very serious. Well, I was no longer in the Catholic Church. I left it. I did have a very abusive nun as a kid. I taught religion for 15 years, but I kept seeing things that I didn't. For me, it just didn't work, so I left. And I didn't believe in past lives yet. I never even thought about that. So I walked away. I didn't say anything. I just didn't know what to say. But later on that day, there was another Indian, and there was a bunch of people in line, and they were laughing and joking, and he was apparently talking to each one, and they were saying things like, "Oh, no way," and they were joking with him. And so I thought, well, that looks like fun. So I get in line. So whenever it comes to be my turn, it's the same story. He gets real serious, asked to hold my hand, gave me the same message with the warrior and the 3 sons, but he didn't say anything about staying on the earth plane after I died. But then, trying to logically figure it out, I thought, well, maybe they just know each other. Well, come to find out, they didn't know each other at all yet. So that was the beginning. So this guy, I started going to powwows, and I started, I made my leather dress. I started to dance. I loved the drums. It just felt really right to me. And so then Jim was this guy's name, this Indian, and his wife's name was Donna. So they would always bring their camper. And so I got to, like, when I'd go to powwows, I would go in and talk to the 2 of them. I just loved talking to them. And we would talk about some very interesting things, but there was a lot of things going on in my life, a lot of synchronicities occurring. And in St. Louis, that's a long story, but how I even found this place is, you could tell it was a destiny thing. But I studied remote viewing. I don't know why I did, I just thought it was interesting. So I did the class with 3 other guys. And what it amounts to is you get an envelope, and inside the envelope is a picture, and it's like they said, it can be of the moon or McDonald's. You don't know what it is. There's 8 numbers on the outside. So what you do is you have this whole pattern of information, and it asks you questions. And I remember one of them was said, okay, if you could see this, what colors would you mainly see? And you're going, what? I have no idea what this is. And then the instructor says, don't worry about it, just guess. Okay. So, you just guess. You think you're just guessing. So that's how it went. There was about 8 different questions referring to what you're supposed to be able to see. And then when you're all done, you put all the information together and you draw a picture. So the very first one I did, I drew a picture of a woman walking next to the ocean, and she had a satchel across her shoulders, and there were 2 big boulders in back of her. So everybody drew their picture, and that was mine. And whenever he took the envelope out, it was a picture of a man hiking in the mountains next to a mountain stream. He had a backpack on and 2 boulders. And right away I said, oh my God, I wasn't even close. And he goes, Ginny, for Pete's sake. And I go, oh. And so the other guys had already studied it, and theirs wasn't even close. So actually I was close, I had no idea. So here's what's cool. So I go home, and one night it was full moon. In learning this about remote viewing and how powerful the mind can be, the moon was so beautiful one evening, so I thought, well, I'm going to go to the moon in my just remote view to the moon. So I'm on the moon, and just, I learned to just don't second guess anything. Just go with your feelings, whatever you see. So I remember the moon dust being really fluffy, and I was walking along, and I started to see these tracks. So I started following the tracks, and they were going up a hill. And I get about halfway up the hill, and I thought, I think there's alien ships on the other side. I don't think I'm going to go any further. So I came back down, just totally going with. So I thought it was funny, and I kind of came back to, and I came into the house, and I told Russell, hey, guess where I just went? He said, where? And I said, I just went on the moon. And he laughed. So the next time I go to a powwow, about 6 months later, I go in the camper with Jim and Donna. And so I go in there, and Donna, his wife, is really aggravated at him. She goes, Jim, you went and did it again. And I said, what? And she goes, he astral projects, Jenny, and he goes out and he stays too long, and then he comes back and takes my energy and goes back out, and then the next day I am worn out. And I go, wow, astral projecting, that's pretty cool. I said, I wish I could do that. And he goes, oh, you do? I go, no, I don't. He goes, oh, I've seen you out there. And I go, are you sure it was me? And he goes, I know you, Ginny. And then he goes, remember here a while back when you were on the moon? And I said, and I stayed totally straight. What are you talking about? And then he said, those were my tracks I was trying to get you to follow. And I go, oh my God. So he started breaking my mind from so many things, breaking it open. We started talking about a lot of things. And it kept going. I had often had premonition dreams in the past. Like I dreamt of my dad's death almost exactly a year before, and everything happened just like that. But recently, then, I had a couple of premonition dreams of our neighbors. One was a boy that was supposed to come home from the hospital on Saturday. And he was like my son's age. He was in an automobile accident. I had this dream, and I woke up, and I told Russell, no, Brandon died last night. And then there was another time, another neighbor died. I didn't remember the dream, but when I woke up, I told Russell, I said, oh my God, something horrible happened to one of our neighbors last night. Well, found out the one that I just mentioned was an older man, and he had his dump truck down by the river, and he couldn't get it started, so he got underneath it to work with it, and it ran over his head. And then Brandon was supposed to come home, but the nurse had put the tube down the wrong, we found this later, and it went into his lungs a few days before that, so he died from that. So the next time I see Jim, I'm saying, told him about that, and then he goes, Ginny, you were there with them. I go, what? He goes, yeah. He says, I've seen you out there. You're one of these people that helps people to cross over. I said, what? Because I didn't remember being there. So what's sweet is the years go by, and like I said, I learned a lot from him. He was about 20 years older than me. He died, I think, in 2000. Maybe 10, something like that. But Donna died before him, his wife, and he really loved her, and he was really depressed. And after she died, he was harder to talk to, and he lived 3 hours away. It's not like I could just go see him at the drop of a hat. So I thought, well, I'll just give him some time, So one night I have this dream, and Jim is in the dream, and he's got his golden leather outfit on, and he's climbing this mountain, and I'm behind him, and I am just like out of breath. My heart's pounding up in my chest, and he finally gets to the top of the mountain, and he turns around and he goes, oh, Ginny, I made it. And he puts his hand down for me, and then boom, I wake up. Well, the next morning I give him a call. And I said, Jim, are you okay? I had this strange dream last night. Well, he didn't. I told him to call me back. That was before cell phones. And anyway, then so he didn't call me back or anything. So my niece got married that afternoon. And I just let it go. But he also did the marriage ceremony for my daughter, Jody, and her husband. It was in our backyard. Oh, he did an awesome job. It was beautiful. We had guys coming through, literally were in tears because they thought the ceremony was so pretty. So Jody and Bill always sent him a Christmas card every year. Well, in January, they got the card back from his daughter. And they said, well, apparently you didn't know, but Dad died last June on him and Mom's anniversary. Well, he already told me, I hate living through our anniversary. I miss her so much. Dang, I looked at the calendar. That was the night. that I dreamt, and that's the night he passed. But he was happy. He was happy he was leaving, but I was there supposedly helping him, but I was worn out going up that mountain. I don't know what I was doing. But, of course, I had a real good cry after that. Again. I'm sorry. So, the next story then, Fool's Crow comes into my life. I read this book, and I thought, oh my God, I loved what he said, what happened to him on Bear Butte Mountain. And it just did something to me. So we love South Dakota, going on trips. So we all went through South Dakota. We were going to go to Yellowstone. We were going to go through South Dakota first, and I wanted to go to Bear Butte Mountain. Well, my husband's working, and I'm working too quite a bit, but 3 kids piling everything together. But I wanted to make prayer ties to go up to Bear Butte, and I forgot it. And so we're driving across South Dakota, and I was expressing my anger at myself for forgetting to get my prayer ties. And so it's kind of neat because my daughter and I, we went into the bathroom, and that was the only quiet place I had. So while I was in the stall, I said a prayer to Fool's Crow. I said, and I don't know why I did this, and I said, Fool's Crow, would you give me three things happened today that I'll know without a doubt it came from you? And I just had this smile on my face. I came out of the stall, and Jody says, why are you smiling? So I told her, I said, well, we'll see what happens, So we're going across on 90. Back then, 90 wasn't near as busy as it is now. But we were like halfway across, and the boys had to go to the bathroom. They were like 8 and 10. And so we stopped out in the middle of nowhere, and there were a bunch of pine trees on the other side. So they got out and ran across the road, and then they started yelling at us, Mom, Dad, come here, look at this. So we get out, and we go across the road, and oh my God, on the other side of those pine trees, it dropped into this huge valley. It was just freaking gorgeous. The wind was really blowing, and guess what? There were a bunch of prayer ties in the trees, and one of them blows out and wraps around my leg. And it was 12 yellow prayer ties. Now, I knew it was somebody else's. But I also had this feeling, is this coming from Fool's Crow? Because I was just talking about this. So I took it with me, and I thought, well, I'll honor the prayers that's there, but I'll just add a few with them and hang it in the tree in Bear Butte. So I thought, is that number 1? So this was on a Tuesday. So we go across the state, and we could see Bear Butte Mountain off in the distance, but it's getting close to noon. The kids were getting hungry. Russell said, let's go on up to Sturgis, and we'll eat, and then we'll come back. So we did. We came back, and we arrive at Bear Butte, and all these cars are going up there, and I thought, wow, this is a popular place, being out in the middle of nowhere. So this is 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. Get up to the top, and there's a bunch of Indians, and something's covered in red, and the Indian is standing there holding this book up. We arrived at the exact time for the unveiling of Fool's Crow's bust at Bear Butte Mountain, and I thought, what? And I was filming it, And so they motioned for us to come over, so then we got part of the, the ceremony, and they had food and stuff, and then it was really, really nice, and the guy from New York is the one who did the sculpting, and he was white, and he was there. And so after it was over with, me and the kids and Russell, we started to walk up to Bear Butte, and a couple of Indians in a pickup honked their horn, motioned for us to come over, and I said, yeah, what? And he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, we were going to go up the mountain and pray. And he says, have you ever been up there? And I said, no. And he goes, it takes a good 45 minutes. He said, Sam DeCory would like for you and your family to come to his house tonight for supper. And I said, okay, well, then we'll just go down here lower. And he says, okay, because it won't. So anyway, so we went to Sam DeCory's house, who was the Indian who was talking about Fool's Crow. So I had my book with him, and I passed my book around for everybody to sign, some of the natives that were there. And there was one native that wrote in black ink. You can see that there. So I'm going to read that. And here's what he said. To the Lady of Medicine. Now, this was in 92, okay? To the Lady of Medicine, and may the spirits of Grandpa be with you, and look to the good of the pipe. Ho. Respectfully, Wambi Glike, Gideon Bison. And when I read it, because they were all gone, and I thought, oh, he probably thought he was writing somebody else's book. Because I don't have a pipe and I don't do medicine work. So 8 years later, fast forward, I had a real bad blood clot in my left leg when I was pregnant with my second baby. It was up in the groin area. It was complete blockage, so the blood was going in, couldn't get out. When the doctor seen it, he said, Ginny, if that breaks loose, you're dead in 3 seconds. Boo. That's how he announced it. Anyway, it was really serious. I was in the hospital a long time. It was 3 months before I could walk. Well, 8 years later, guess what? In that 8 years, somebody gave me a pipe. I also started doing energy healing work. But whenever I got the announcement that I had another blood clot, this time it was due to a fibroid tumor. So they injected me with lots of blood thinner like they did before. But this time my heart reacted and it started beating super fast and wouldn't stop. It was between 150, 160 beats a minute. And steady Eddie, and 2 nights I couldn't sleep. I called my doctor and I said, can't we undo this? Because this is not good. And she said, Ginny, you don't have a choice. So then a friend of mine in St. Louis who was Native American said, I know a guy who's a very powerful healer, and he's up in North Dakota. And he gave me his number and stuff, and I called him. And he was more than happy to come down, to drive down. And I thought, wow, that's nice. So on the way down, I began to feel energy in my stomach really strong, and I thought, wow. So I called him, and I said, are you working on me? And he goes, yeah. I said, man, I can really feel it. Can you maybe back off a little bit? And he goes, well, that's good. You feel it that good. And I said, yeah, if we got to talking. And then he mentioned Fool's Crow. He said he was Fool's Crow's grandson. And I said, wait a minute, I got his book. He just had a granddaughter, or a daughter and a granddaughter. And he goes, well, I came from his first wife. So he came down. And then I found out his name was Gideon Bison, the man who wrote in my book. So I showed him this when he got to the house. And I said, how did you know this? I said, yeah, I got a pipe now. And yeah, now I'm starting to do energy healing. I said, how did you know that? He goes, I just listen to spirit. So we did a ceremony, a wool whippy ceremony. There were about 10 of us in the room. And I made 405 prayer ties on the way down. So him and I sat in that circle. Of course, my heart's still going crazy. And the first thing, about 7 or 8 orbs, red orbs, appear on the wall. And he said, spirit, be gone. And they went right through the wall. Found out later, nobody else seen it but me. My daughter and her husband were in there. And I thought, how can you not see that? So anyway, so the ceremony went on, and I started this crying fit again. He said, why are you crying? I said, I don't know. And so we were in there quite a while, and I felt a tremendous pressure on the uterus. And I was really happy. I thought, good, maybe it's going to get rid of that fibroid tumor. And all of a sudden we were in there probably 40 minutes, and he says, turn on the light. And I said, why? He says, the tumor is way too big, Ginny. It's not going to pass. And so we turned on the light, and then he was going to do a flesh offering. And he was right about that. 2 years later, I had a hysterectomy. The tumor was 5 pounds. There's no way it was going to pass. I'm sure it wasn't quite that big then, but it was big. So he took flesh offerings, 4 on this side in a row, and 4 directions on this side. He put on alcohol, his surgical gloves, and he goes to dig He said, boy, you got thick skin. I go, yeah, I heard that before. So he digs it out. But I said right away, oh, wait a minute. I said, I'm on a lot of blood thinner. I'm going to bleed like crazy. And he goes, no, you won't. So he digs it out. I wasn't bleeding. You know, you could see the red. It didn't even drip. He digs out 4 and 4, puts it in this pouch. And my daughter wanted to do the same. So she did her flesh offerings, and the blood just ran down her arm. Well, the other thing, too, by the time the ceremony was over, my heart had completely slowed down. And that was my main danger right then, was my heart was going to give out if it didn't slow down. So I wore a medicine pouch. I prayed every morning like he said to do. And I was just blown away by, you know, so hold on a second. I kind of lost where I'm at. I printed this big so I could see without glasses. So it's not, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so over the years, you know, I did a lot of traveling with the energy healing work, and I kept running into Native Americans. How much time do I have? Oh, okay. Okay, good. Then I can finish. Okay. So anyway, all total, over the years, I was told the same thing by Native Americans, that I was a warrior. 6 different tribes, it didn't seem to matter. And I thought, how do they do this? How do they know that? And I want to tell you the last 2, second to the last one was in 2019. And I've had experiences with Sasquatch. So I was at a Sasquatch conference in Washington State, and Garrett Duncan was there. He's Navajo. Maybe some of you know him. Okay, so I signed up for a healing session with him. It was 20 minutes long. So I just loved his energy and the way he talked. And I walk in the doorway, and he goes, "You're not here for a healing, are you?" And I said, "Well, no, actually, I wanted to talk to you more about Sasquatch." And he goes, "Okay." He says, "Because with your auric field, Ginny, you can heal yourself." And I go, "Well, I do energy healing." He goes, "Okay, that makes sense." So he said, "Sit down." And then I sat down there, and all of a sudden, he looks over and he goes, okay, I'll tell her. And there's nobody sitting there. And I'm looking at him, and then he says, "You really love this country, don't you?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, especially South Dakota and Wyoming." He says, "You were Indian before, but you know that now, don't you?" And I go, "Yeah, I've been told too many times. Yeah, I know." And then he goes, "Okay, I'll tell her." And then he looks at me and he says, "Are you familiar with Crazy Horse?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." You know, I said, "Just last year I went to St. Louis. His family all came there, and I bought another book and CDs." And I said, was awesome." He goes, "Yeah, you fought with him." I go, "Are you kidding?" I thought, oh, here you go. This was another thing that, I'm sorry. But how they know this. And anyway, but it made sense with what I felt and stuff. And so he said, he gave me my name, and he said I was Cheyenne. And, well, I knew Crazy Horse was Sue. So when I get home and I look, and I had already listened to the CDs, but I just picked out one and put it in, and within a few minutes I got my answer that towards the end of his life, he lost a lot of Sioux warriors, and he did fought hard with a group of Cheyenne. I just went to my knees crying again. So anyway, I was getting my answers, and so, yeah. Shoot. So the last one was 2 years ago. I got the print here, but I didn't bring the painting. I'm keeping it. But I wanted to paint Wounded Knee. And, you know, every time we went to South Dakota on vacation, I always wanted to go there. So I'd been there 4 or 5 times. And I remember the time before this last time, I was 56, and I was teaching a class in Rapid City. So I went there by myself, and I was at the bottom, and I was talking to a couple of Native Americans, seeing how their life was, and I started to go up to the top, and this real pretty lady came up to me. She was 72, Native American, and we got to talking, and, you know, just got to know her. And before I left, I said, well, do you have any children or grandchildren? And she said, no, that's a sad story. And I had read about how so many little kids died of diarrhea. And she said, no, I was sterilized, Jenny. I go, what? I had not heard of it then. I said, sterilized? And she said, yeah, I was only 11 years old, and 55 of my classmates were sterilized. And she was crying. I gave her a hug, and I was like, oh my God, how horrible is that? And I go home and I look it up, and the last one done in this country was in 1976 in Northern California. The last one done in Canada was in 1984. Sterilizing these people. I was sickened. I climb up to the mountain, and there was a gate around it now. There didn't used to be. So nobody was around, so I opened the gate, and I went in, and I slid down by the tomb. And I wasn't there long. I was praying, and this Indian drives up, and he gets out of the car, and he yells at me, what are you doing in there? And I thought, ooh, he was a big guy. And then he opened the door for his wife and nephew, or found out later, and then he yelled at me again, and I said, well, I'm praying. And then he walked real brisk over to the gate, and he was mad, and he gets on the gate, and he looks down at me into the eyes again, and he goes, oh, you're really a good person. And then he helped me up. Now, he's not the one I was going to tell you about, but I just wanted to tell you about the lady. But fast forward then, we stood there and talked a good hour. I really enjoyed talking to all of them. But when I went to Wounded Knee just 2 years ago, I wanted to paint it. So I got there on a Tuesday evening, and I was going to paint it Wednesday morning. And there were some other white people around, and this young man comes up to me. He said, my name is Little Moon, and I'm just here to tell people what happened here. And I said, oh, it's okay, I already know what happened here. So he looks at me, gets close again, touches my hand, and then he goes, oh my God, you do know. And he starts crying, and he hugs me, bawling his eyes out. I'm bawling my eyes out. I didn't cry before he said that, but he knew again. And then what's really cool too is a little later, he said, I want to show you something. So he got in my car, and we went down to the bottom, and he showed me where Crazy Horse was buried. Now, why would he do that? You know, he knew. I didn't say nothing about Crazy Horse. So that was my last one. And so here is, I want to talk about this knowingness that they have. Actually, her dad came to visit me back in 1998. And at first I couldn't remember why he came, but I remember now. He came because that's when we were starting Earth's Classroom. And one of the programs we did was a Native American program. And he heard about it, and I think, you know, he didn't talk to me about that. He was just checking me out. So we went for a walk in the woods, and I really liked him and stuff. And that's why I couldn't remember, because he wasn't questioning me about what I was doing. He was just seeing who I was. So anyway, I thought it was so cool. But it took me a while to put it together, because then he was standing out, and he gave me the books that he wrote, but they didn't have the cover. They were just paper covers. So then when I bought the book, when I was here a couple of years ago, I went home and I go, oh my God, that's the same man. So anyway, so I knew him. So anyway, with this, so what I did was for 23 years, I helped teach the Native American program at Earth's Classroom, and this was for children. So they've seen about 82,000 kids now. And so I was out in front of the TP, and I would teach about the sign language, and I would make it fun for the kids because there were over 200 languages spoken here. So they used sign language like crazy. And now when the historians studied their language, they were really impressed except for one word, and that was think. The European sign for think was this. The Native American sign for think was this, from the heart. So, guess what? So then, they also, with further studies, they found out that this area right here is 5,000 times stronger in magnetism than our brains. And then with further studies, they found out that people that were strong right-brained, which are people that are more intuitive and creative and sensitive, blah, 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 they could tap in to this energy and get as much as 1 million bits of info per second. Now, you can't think that much, but they could tap in and get that much info just by tapping in. If you were very strong left brain, very logically minded, you could get a whole big 7 because they were constantly fighting the mind thing. It wasn't logical to do that. So that's why to this day, women tend to be more intuitive because they can tap into that. They don't know they're doing it. So anyway, what's interesting is the Earth's energy is connected to every cell of our body. And we are connected to every living thing on this planet. That's why when you emanate love, animals, I have a prayer circle in the woods, and as long as my dogs aren't around, I've had experiences where deer come right up to you, or a raccoon or squirrel or whatever. Why? Because if you're emanating a gentle, loving energy, they just sense it and smell it. Just, they tune into that, just like the Native Americans did. And something else, a native elder told me, he said, Ginny, because I asked him, I said, how is it that you people know this? He said, Ginny, with the white man, with their children, they always tell them what to do and what not to do and how high to jump, and you don't do this. And he said, we didn't do that with our children. We knew that they already knew. They had to learn to tap in. So he said, if I was asked a question, I didn't answer them. I'd say, what do you think? I don't know. You go home and think about it. You come back, tell me tomorrow. You listen to your heart. So he says, we taught our kids from little on up. And I thought, wow, that is so beautiful. So anyway, so then then just studying it and looking into it more, this energy radiates out in front of the heart about 3 feet. The same energy around the head just barely comes out. And also, hold on a second, so I do energy healing too. So it says when we do, because I could feel things at times. I've done healings in Australia, England, Russia, and Germany. And it doesn't matter how far away they are. They feel it instantly, just like you would if you were sitting right here. So that consciousness connection we have with each other is phenomenal. We are all connected. So they say that biophotons with energy healing can spike anywhere from 12 to 100 to 1,000 to 5,000 per second. And then it spikes 10 times its strength at the baseline. So this is powerful stuff. They're starting to do studies on children now, blindfolding them and telling them to draw something and telling them they can do it. And they'll draw a picture of whatever they want to do, and it's like they're looking right at it. I didn't know I was doing that, but I did a painting on this back side, and it's called Dimensional Flight. I put out 4 different wild colors, but I didn't know about this then. I did that quite a while ago, just for fun. I put on this Native American music, and the only thing I looked at is when I filled my brushes with that particular paint. Then I blindfolded, and I had this big canvas, and I swished around, and I put all 4 colors on there. Then when I got done, I started seeing this stuff, and you'll see what it is over there. So I didn't take off anything. I just added to what I was already seeing, which is pretty cool. So that's that consciousness connection. This is a funny story too. Another native friend of mine, one of the things I do is radionics. So you got your stick plate and your machine. So when they teach you radionics, and I was teaching radionics, we were told that the radionics with certain frequencies dial in, it connects to the universe, and so you're connecting to the stick plate. So I was telling my Indian friend about this, and he laughed. He said, "Oh, Jenny, you're the one connecting to the universe, not the plate." And this was a while ago, and he just laughed and walked away, and I thought, God dang, he's probably right. So my point is that this is so beautiful. And I just think that this is, right now, there's a lot of, we are improving, but right now, there's a lot of differences going on in our world, all around the world. And it's okay that we have different opinions or we have different talents and everything, but if we all know that within us is this absolutely beautiful spirit of God's energy, the Creator's energy, if we take time to understand, we're really beautiful inside. But we don't learn to trust that. We end up hearing how bad you are, whatever. I know when I was a kid, man, I heard a lot of bad stuff. But it's beautiful. And hold on, I'm almost done. Yeah, I did that. So I know this. As we learn who we are in life and things get hard, little by little, I'm learning to tap into that. And when I do, I feel a peace, So the oneness that I talked about in the beginning as one, if we all start to understand that we all share that loving energy, even a person in prison, I don't care how bad they've done, they still have that beauty inside of them. They just don't know it. They haven't seen it. They haven't recognized it. So I want to close with something the Crazy Horse said in his vision as he sat smoking the sacred pipe with his cousin, Sitting Bull. A lot of people don't know they were cousins, but they both had the ability to see into the future. This was in September of 1877, 4 days before he died. He said this: "Upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separation, a world longing for light again. I see a time long after the skies have grown dark and ugly, and the water has become bad smelling. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. In that day, there will be those among the Lakota who will carry the knowledge and understanding of unity of all living things. And the young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for this wisdom. I salute the light within your eyes where the whole universe dwells. For when you are at that center within you, and I am at that place within me, we shall be one." Period.